day in about 23 years ago, when I had the good fortune of living about a half mile down the road from Donna and Joe Rogers' Cockburn farm. And they had settled in there as a whipper-in and later huntsman to Dr. Rogers' English pack of the loud hounds, and began riding their racehorses. Donna Rogers just told me just a minute ago that during his tenure riding their horses over the 10 years, he rode 166 races on the Rogers horses alone and had 38 victories. But, and we're going to see some of those pictures in the movie that we'll be seeing later. But I didn't know where I was living when I bought this place on Harmony Church Road. I had grown up showing horses, and I was introduced to fox hunting by Dr. Joseph Rogers. So I was a total neophyte, and Bay, in his way, was welcoming to everybody. And he got me involved in fox hunting. And I was soon swept up by, the enthusiasm that he showed for all things associated with hounds and hunting and horses. And it wasn't really long before he converted me into a total hunt addict, and I got rid of all my show horses. So I know with the schedule that I had, I made every effort to arrange my schedule so that I could go out hunting with him when he hunted Dr. Rogers' hounds out of Hillbrook. And it would kill me knowing he was out hunting and I had to go to work. But I remember being out hunting with him one day, and it was a day like today. It was cold and it was damp and it was a dreary weekday. What you might call a perfect hunting day. And he was riding his favorite horse, a horse called Don't Tell Mom, who was the dam of I'm Telling, who was an award-winning timber horse just in the last couple of years. But anyway, Mom loved hunting. And she was a horse that could locate hounds even when humans couldn't. And there were only a handful of us out in the field that day. It was Harry Milner and Joanne Milner, who's here today, Kathy Milam, and myself. And the hounds began speaking along the creek, along Dr. Clegg's bottom in Lincoln. And they were soon in full cry and going away very, very quickly. So, as Bay would allow, we rode right up with him when we were out hunting, and we were all galloping, to stay up with Bay, who was trying to stay up with hounds. And we came across this huge tree that had fallen in the path, and there was no way around the tree. So the only option to us, it seemed, was to turn around and go back down the creek, cross the creek, and go up the other side. Well, Bay wouldn't have any of that, so he had to stay with his hounds. And so he sent Ma through the tree, and Ma went through and witnessed to his determination. I mean, he had an iron will and an iron determination, and he had a passion for hunting. And besides that, he had a magnetic personality that attracted people to him. And people wanted to be close to him, and they wanted to be associated with him. And whether it was hunting with him, or watching and cheering him on at the races, or socializing with him at his favorite haunt, the beautiful South in Hamilton, Virginia, which became the de facto clubhouse for hunt members, he just carried you along in his wake. He was also, he could be gruff and kind of grumbling at times, but he was very inclusive and welcoming. And if you could keep up with his brutal schedule, he welcomed you along. Now, Carolyn Hellman was telling me the other night, the first time she met him up at Goshen, she was at a landowner's party, and he was there, and he was the new huntsman for the Goshen hunt at that time. It was like 1991. And they were having I think Gordy was hosting the landowner's party, and she had met Bay, and they're there partying 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and she says, yeah, I gotta get home because we're going hunting in the morning. Bay was still there, 7 o'clock in the morning, off he goes with the hounds, and she said in that afternoon she went down to the Gold Cup races, and there was riding 5 races, and he won like 2 or 3 of them. So this man had so much energy. I mean, he was just indefatigable, and it was, I don't know really of anybody who could keep up with him on a full-time schedule. But he wanted my impression of him and my experience with him was that he wanted members of the hunt to be involved in all hunt activities. And he actively solicited everyone to do this. I mean, he encouraged people to get involved with the hounds. Wendy Clouderback was named the chief whelper in charge, basically, because he sent all the bitches to her to be whelped. And she did that very important responsibility for the Loudon Hunt West. Under Karen Jones's tutelage, a group of us annually took hounds to the Maryland Puppy Show, to the Kentucky shows, to the North Carolina shows. And although Bay always poo-pooed hound shows himself, I think everyone in the hunt into participating in trail clearing. So he was just a very inclusive person, and everybody felt welcome and, you know, part of the hunt. Now, during his time as the master huntsman of Loudon West, people came from all over the country to hunt with him as his reputation grew. I know Catherine Berger, who I don't know if she's here today, but Catherine Berger used to fly in from Denver to hunt with us. Michael Hoffman used to come down every weekend from New York City, and Nancy and Barry Fry used to fly in on their private plane and hook up with Barbara Patterton, and they'd come over the mountain to hunt from Blue Ridge. Susie and Pug Hart actually moved their entire thoroughbred business from Florida to Virginia just to hunt with Bay. And Jack Helmley and Linda Bear Johnson came from Upper Marlboro, and they all eventually moved to the Loudon Hunt territory to be part of that experience. Evan Sutton was another one who, when he was working for the Hardaway Construction Company and was all over the country on construction jobs, would come every weekend to hunt. And Harry Milner and his daughter Joanne moved into the Loudon, and Dixie, I'm sorry, Dixie, I forgot to mention, moved in from Maryland and bought a farm right on Harmony Church Road, you know, down the road from Hillbrook, all to be part of Bay's experience hunting the hounds there in Loudon West. And it wasn't just field members who made the trek to hunt with Bay. We had masters come from all over. I remember Peter Hitchin and Skip and Vicki Crawford used to come down from Potomac, Ray Moffitt from Fairfax, Linda Armbruster from Blue Ridge, Rick Jones from Goshen, and Dennis Foster, who is the executive director of the Masters of Fox Hunt Association, they were all regulars hunting with Bay down in Virginia. One of the funniest stories I remember was when a hunt from Kentucky, the Woodford Hounds, brought their hounds to hunt and spend a hunting weekend with Bay. And I think it was Charlie Walker was the master huntsman. And this was a time when Bay had a broken arm. One of the young horses at Hillbrook had kicked him in the elbow, and he had a broken arm. So he invited Charlie Walker. He said, "Will you you take your hounds out today, and I'll follow you and show you around the country, but you go ahead and hunt your hounds." So we start off, and we're going along, and Charlie's horse stopped at a jump. Well, Bay had no control over his horse because he had a broken arm. So his horse slams into the back of Charlie's horse and kind of unseats Charlie. And Charlie said, "God damn, Bay, I heard it was dangerous to ride with you behind you, but I thought if I was ahead of you, I'd be safe." But he just thrived on creating an atmosphere and an opportunity for everyone to experience good sport. And he loved it when people enjoyed the performances of his hounds. And with Dr. Gable leading the field and Bay hunting the hounds, I can tell you, we had some grand days. And, you know, he just had a magnetic personality that attracted people to him. And they wanted to be close, and they wanted to be associated with him. You know, Catherine Berger told me last week, she said, he was a showman, and he certainly was. And Peg Hay, who was a grand friend of Bay's, said to me last week that she described Bay, who she said, he was brilliant with hounds and the best sportsman I ever knew. They threw away the mold when they made him, and I think we all feel that way. But before we go to the speaker, I think it's important to realize, and I think we all have this sense, that he was the common denominator through which many of us in this room came to know each other. And those were some really fun, exhilarating days that we refer to as the Bay Days. Now, you know, we all know he loved to socialize. So at the end of a hunting day, we would all end up in the beautiful South in Hamilton, Virginia. And I remember one time, I mean, it was a sight to behold there, because there would be goosenecks and trailers and vans parked all up and down Route 7 there, where Harmony Church Road comes into Route 7. One day, the Loudoun County Sheriff Officer comes into the beautiful South while we're, you know, having our libations, and he goes, "You know, you need a special permit when you have big events like this," he said, "because, you know, we need to send an officer up here to control traffic." But that was just a normal post-hunting little get-together. The other thing that made, you know, that made an impression on me was that he was a natural-born winner. And he was fearless, and he was competitive, and as I said before, he had an iron will and determination. He really knew no limits. And these are the personality traits that allowed him to develop into a champion race rider, an award-winning trainer, and a renowned huntsman. They were also the traits that gave him the fortitude, really, to carry on a productive life after he suffered a catastrophic injury in April of 1998. He was an inspiration to me, and I know by the fact that you're here, he was an inspiration to you too. And I know that every one of you in this room has a very special connection to him. And I know you treasured your friendship with him, and just as significantly, he treasured his friendship with you. I'm sure, and when we reconvene to the bar later, that everyone will have a really funny story to tell about Ray. And that's really why we gathered here today, is to pay tribute and to reminisce and to share memories and to celebrate the life of a man who brought each of us such joy. So we're now going to ask several speakers to come up to talk about their interaction with Bay. And we just kind of want to weave a tapestry of his life that some of you may know parts of it and others of you may know other parts of it, but to bring it all together in a patchwork quilt. So the first speaker I'd like to invite up is the current master of Loudoun Fairfax Hunt, David Moyes. David, could you come on up? David actually began hunting with Dr. Joseph Rogers, as many of us did, in the Loudoun Hunt in the mid-1970s. He's a former steeplechase rider and also rode under Dr. Rogers' tutelage, as Bay did. He was the president of the Loudoun Hunt, and then later president of the Loudoun Hunt West when that was created in 1994. And he worked with Dr. Rogers to find his successor in the late 1980s, which materialized in the person of Bay Cockburn. So to speak to Bay's early days as a huntsman and later master of the Loudoun Hunt West, I'd like to introduce David Moyes.
Barbara, it's hard to follow the scope of your wonderful recollections. I am very honored to be here and to look out and see Sammy and Katie and Chrissy and Cordy and all of his friends. I won't start naming them, but I'm going to focus on the family a little bit. But my assignment was to connect Bay's initial experience here in the United States when he came here in 1988 on visitor's visa. He really partnered with Dr. Rogers very quickly. They hit it off. Don and Joe basically took him in, and the consequence of that may not be totally, you may not be totally aware of that, but Dr. Rogers was a true thrill seeker. I look around, I'm not sure how many in this room actually ever hunted with Dr. Rogers, but the parallels are pretty striking. Dr. Rogers was a well-mounted huntsman. He was a master horseman. He was a champion steeplechase jockey. He was a champion horse trainer and breeder. He was a farmer. He amassed tremendous hunting country just for fox hunting and for the sake of preservation. And when it came time for Joe in the mid-80s, he started thinking about a successor. And those of you who know Dr. Rogers know that he worried about things. And he worried about who would take care of that English pack of foxhounds. As is typical of the hunts, there were divisions. We had two packs at that time, one American pack, one English. And he diligently pursued someone to succeed him and to take the English pack on when he retired. And along came Bay Cockburn. And they partnered and they met. I think it was an instantaneous thing. I've had to ask Donna sometimes to resurrect some of the memory of this. But they took him in, essentially. And wouldn't you know it, he started hunting the hounds. He rode those Rogers horses from Hillbrook to many, many victories. He was a champion rider. He was a true horseman. He was an athlete. He was charismatic. And to me, what Dr. Joe did was he found somebody to replace him. And the parallels are incredible. If you ever found yourself tucked in behind Bay Cockburn when hounds were in full cry and they were running on in open country, you knew you were in trouble. It was a heart-in-mouth experience. You went through country that you normally would never do consciously. And it was a great satisfaction to Bay. I don't think he thought about it. He never was concerned about it. He flaunted. He was truly a thrill seeker, just like Dr. Rogers. I had the same experience with Dr. Rogers at the height of his hunting career. Well-mounted, big fences, unlimited gallops. It was just incredible. So to me, I watched this evolve and I look back on it as my contact and my friendship with Bay matured over that period of time. There came a time, first Bay was the huntsman. There came a time, though, when Joe handed him the horn. Now, for those of you who know Dr. Rogers, I've never known anybody before or after that hunted with a cow horn. And maybe somebody knows, but it's around your neck and it's a cow horn. And Dr. Rogers could make that sing, and on a misty morning out coving or something, you could hear that sound, and it was eerie and it was beautiful. He could make that instrument sing. And he handed that horn to Bay. And I remember those first few times when Bay had responsibility for the hounds, and we would be listening for that sound, and what we'd hear was the sound of a wounded animal. They're out there in the woods. Of course, the hounds, I think, eventually, he was a hound magnet. Whether he was in a wheelchair or on a horse, it didn't matter. And eventually he mastered that horn and went on to the brass horn, of course. But when he was actually taken in by the Rogers family, he lived there. He got his green card there, and eventually was hired as a professional huntsman and became the master of the hunt. Not without some controversy, but it was basically the best thing that ever happened. He, as Barbara described, and I won't repeat the accolades so much, but he was a wonderful huntsman. And the fact that he took that English pack the way Dr. Joe did was was moving, to say the least. The Bay was not only very exciting to ride with, there were a lot of laughs, a lot of good times. One of the, aside from the exhilaration of riding with Bay, was some of the unique things that he did that are embedded in my memory. As is the case with a good huntsman, he will dismount his horse and take his hounds into cover on a fox gone to ground, or to pick up a line, or to cheer them on if they've gone to ground, or just to hunt that cover because you can't get in there. Maybe prohibited ground, what have you. Well, Bay would often get down, and it was always fun to watch. And, he was fearless and muddy, as happy as can be, swearing. He had phrases that he brought from England that I've never heard before. The amazing thing about Bay Cockburn, as we would wait there for him to get the hounds out or to finish what he was doing, and he would come up to his horse, and I don't know how he did it. I mean, the jockey and him took over, and he could leap from standing next to that horse, lay himself over the horse, and bring his leg around, and somehow get back on that horse, and off he'd go. It was incredible to watch. But it wasn't without some humor at times. He never used a log or asked for a leg or used a fence or what have you. One time I recall when he came out from the brush and the horse was brought over to him. And I don't think he realized he was on a very tall horse that day. So in front of probably 40 or 50 people, he leapt up on the horse, but he didn't quite get there. Like he was cheating up on the saddle. And the horse thought this was very amusing and turned and trotted back towards the field, with Bay hanging off the horse, hand entwined in Bay's whip. And of course we were all. And as the horse trotted by us, you could hear Bay, stop horse, stop horse. And then the English phrase would come out, one that I had never heard before. Bloody horse, you're as daft as a brush. Daft as a brush? What is that? And we had some good laughs about that later. The other thing that I think came from his connection with Dr. Rogers and the years they spent together was his landowner skills. He was so charismatic. He was charismatic to a default. And I don't mean that negatively in any way, but he attracted people, men and women, to him like flies. And the landowners loved him. We opened country that we'd never been on before, and that was, of course, Dr. Rogers' major goal was to be good to the landowners. And he was a patient, caring doctor and had all these connections. And Bay would go out and just endear himself to those landowners. And of course, when he'd open country, Bay had this strange sense of construction. And when he felt we needed to get away from one field to the next, he would construct something. And, we're pretty well used to the panels and the coops and so forth, but these were Bay jumps. And sometimes they were no wider than the horse's shoulder between two trees. And even today, like his mounting skills, I measure everyone by, if they're trying to mount in the field and it gets harder and harder the longer you do this, sometimes way too long before you should quit, I give them a Bay Cockburn score, 1 to 10, on their remount in the field. And I haven't had more than a 1. Most of the people have no idea what I'm talking about when I rate them. But the fences he built were similarly unusual. And today there's still several of them in our country. And I know that I personally, respectfully, ride by them, looking for another way into that field. I'm not going over that thing unless I have to. Many, many light moments. They, a lot of times we would have conversations at the beautiful South or at parties. I remember one in particular that was shook me to my core because of the circumstance. And it involved typical couple of drinks, and we were talking about the idea of a traumatic injury and what we would do if we got one, you know, if it happened to us in the hunt field, and how we handle it. Could we handle it? And we were very macho about it, you know. And honestly, Sammy and Katie, visiting Bay in the hospital, having had that conversation a bare 2 weeks perhaps before his terrible injury, he scared me. And I knew that he was going through accepting what had happened to him. And he was trying to figure out how he would do it. He scared me, you know, talking to him. Because I'd never seen anything like that. But you know what? There was a point where he just said, I want to see my children grow up. I want to be part of their life. I want to experience that. And I knew right then and there that this man was going to go forward and make the best of this situation. He was going to kick on, you know, and he did. So, whether he was in a wheelchair or on a horse, the guy was absolute athlete, gentleman, with humor. I don't think I ever heard him really complain or ask for sympathy. He would ask for help, but it was in such a way as it was matter of fact. You know, he helped out here, and you people in this room, and particularly some that I'm looking at right here, you have inspired me. The way you rally around Bay Cockburn is just incredible. And I can tell you, Sammy and Katie, that your genes will allow you to face anything in life that would happen to you with the courage and the staying power and perseverance that you have in your blood. He was a truly inspiration to me, as you can tell. And I'm honored to have known him and be his friend. He'll be with me forever. I saw a quote, and I don't know, you know, when you see a quote, but I'm going to try and repeat it correctly, because it just seems like it fits Bay Cockburn. I hope I don't mess it up. It's so simple it would be silly if I did. Sometimes when you fall, you wake up. Sometimes when you fall, you die. Sometimes when you fall, you fly. Bay Cockburn flew.
We all know that the lot of a whipper-in of any hunt is to get all the blame when things go wrong, and none of the praise when things go right. So our next speaker brings a unique perspective in that she served as a whipper-in to Bay, not only at the Goshen hunt, but at Loudon Hunt West. And she survived to tell the story. So we all know that we had to have a thick skin, you know, to serve as Bay whipper-in. And because sometimes that passion and that energy and that intensity that he had could overrule civility. So, but she did survive, and she's here to talk about what it was like to serve as a staff member to Bay in 2 different hunts. Karen Jones.
I'm here to talk a little bit about Bay and the 2 hunts that I served as whipper in to him under. In 1991, Goshen Hounds lost their huntsman, Nicholas Hartman. He decided to retire. And my husband, Rick Jones, who was master of Goshen Hounds at the time, remembered this funny Englishman that Chrissy Keyes had married, and knew that he had hunted hounds down in Virginia. And our kennels happened to be very close to the Cockburn residence, so he thought, I wonder if they might be interested in taking the position at Goshen Hounds. So he approached Bay, and Bay considered the offer, and he ended up accepting the position as huntsman at Goshen Hounds. He had just started a new family. I think Katie, 1991, how old were you, Katie? One. Yeah, he had a new family, and I think he was interested in maybe staying close to home. Well, Bay called, and he invited Rick and myself down to the last hunt of Loudon Hunt's season that year, and it was late. We had all closed down. It was either the last week in March or the first week in April. It was hot. But Rick and I were not going to miss the opportunity to go down and hunt with Bay and to hunt with Loudon Hunt. So we started off from Hillbrook. We had about 25 people in the field. And after many hours and many miles, we had 5 people left in the field. Harry Milner, he got scraped off his horse by a vine. I think he broke his collarbone. I'm not sure it was a collarbone, but he broke something. And somebody else went down and broke their arm. As the 5 people, Rick and I were still there, and the only reason we were there is we had not a clue how to get back to Hillbrook. So this was our first experience of Bay's magic. We got to experience his lilting voice and his whistle for his hound. I don't know how many of you remember that. And we got to listen to his lovely horn. So we were getting a taste of what the next 3 years at Goshen were going to be like, and we were real excited. By the beginning of the season, Dr. Rogers had convinced Bay to continue hunting the hounds at Loudon Hunt. So he was after hunting 2 packs. So much for the staying close to home to his family. He just doubled his work. I had started whipping in to Nick Hartum, so I whipped for Bay that first year and continued until his accident in 1998, and I survived. He was demanding, but if you met his expectations, he would put his full trust and confidence in you. Bay changed the field's manner of going, which is to this day carried on by Robert Taylor and the other masters of Goshen Hounds. He would tell the masters, follow me. Don't go stand on a hillside. You're going to get left behind. And in our territory in Goshen, we have a lot of woods, a lot of valleys, and it's awfully easy to lose the hounds. During Bay's 3rd year with Goshen, things were happening down in Virginia. The Loudon Hunt ended up splitting up, with one faction joining up with Dr. Gable's pack to become Loudon Hunt West, with the kennels at Dr. Gable's farm, Valley in Hamilton, Virginia. Unfortunately, Goshen lost Bay to Loudon Hunt West, where he became the hunting master. Of course, I moved with Bay because at that point I was hooked on the excitement and enthusiasm that Bay showed in his hunting. At Goshen, Bay came to appreciate the speed and cry of the American hounds, and with his experience with the English hound, he settled on the crossbred hound as the most desirable hound for Loudon Hunt West territory. Of course, our first year at Loudon Hunt West, we had a bit of a ragtag pack. Sorry, Dr. Gable. We had the base of Dr. Gable's pack, and then we drafted hounds from just about every hunt in Northern Virginia and some from Maryland, too. Bay's main goal in his breeding program was a good hunting hound, but he had a contingent of staff, or me, who loved showing hounds. So when we were given the opportunity, we would put our 2 cents in to try to get some breeding for some confirmation so we could show those hounds. Although he didn't enjoy showing the hounds, he gladly turned over all the planning, all the preparation, and all the participation to us. But he did really support us, and he was a great cheerleader, and we did meet with some success in the show ring. Bay's hounds loved going out with him. They had confidence that he was going to find them foxes. He, in turn, trusted his hounds. One of the things that always impressed me the most was if he was on the other side of the cover and a whip hollered a fox away on the other side of that color, he would allow those hounds and he would encourage those hounds to go to that holler without him. And as long as the whip was positioned correctly, those hounds could pick that line up and go off. Bay has left all of us with great memories to this day. Out of my memories sticks one particular hunt. We were at Oakland Green, and Bay was drawing Janny's bottom, and the hounds struck, and they were in full cry going towards Middleburg. Well, Bay and the field, they were on the Oakland Green side of the creek. So the field came down, and they were crossing the creek at one of the only good crossings in that nasty little creek. So Bay is coming along the bank, issuing forth some language that I can't repeat here, but he saw a bottleneck at the crossing, and he wanted to get over there and get going with the hounds. Well, he decided he was going to go into the creek, and he was unhappy, he and Happy were going to find their own way across that creek. So they dropped down into that creek, and Happy very soon dropped into a hole, and they went under. So I'm going along the creek, and here is Bay's hard hat. So I went on with the hounds. Somehow, either he got up, the field got him up, but he was up because here's Bay coming along, just drenching, spewing water all over the place. So we chased that fox. We chased him all the way to Ray Moffitt's, and that fox went to ground. So Bay dismounted, and he was blowing the fox to ground, and he was sloshing around in his boots. So he sits down next to the hole, and he pulls the boot off, and he starts pouring water out of the boot, and out of the hole comes the fox. He obviously had gone where he was not welcome. So the fox took off, the hounds took off, the whips took off, the field took off, and there was Bay sitting on the ground. One boot on, one boot off. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, the fox didn't get far, and the hounds did catch him, because I think that we would have seen Bay running behind us with stocking feet. So, oh, the memories. The memories, they're good, they're bad, they're funny, and they're sad. And I just thank Bay for one of the most memorable and exciting chapters of my life. Thank you.
Well, I witnessed what he did on Happy when he went underwater and Karen went on. Is he popped up and he says, "Hounds are running, stay with him," and then he dove underwater to find his board. Our next speaker, Andrew Barkley. He's a legend in his own right in the hunting world. He served as the huntsman in the Green Spring Valley Hounds for 20 years. And he is one of the most respected, if not the most respected huntsman ever to carry a horn in the United States. He retired from the Green Spring Valley Hounds in 2001 and is currently serving as a mentor for the Developing Huntsman's program sponsored by the Masters of Foxhound Association. And he was a contemporary of Bay's in Maryland in the 1990s, and he will speak to Bay also, the huntsman. Andrew?
Bear with me, I'm not 16. That's a long time. There was some in this room who only knew Bay in that chair. There was another Bay, the Bay before the accident. The Bay that could ride like the wind, and who at one time hunted 2 packs of foxhounds and then just for kicks rode races in his spare time. That was the Bay I was asked to speak about, Bay the huntsman. Bay grew up hunting in Warwickshire. Both his parents hunted, as did most of his extended family. He hunted extensively as a child and used to tell some wonderful stories of the mischief they would get into. Hunting was in his blood. Later, working in Ireland, he whipped into the Kildare hounds before moving to America. Bay started as huntsman of Dr. Rogers' Loudon Hounds in 1989, taking over the horn after Dr. Rogers retired. In 1991, Goshen was looking for a huntsman, and Bay took the job. He was married to Chrissy Keys by then and lived in Brookville. So from 1991 to 1994, Bay was hunting 2 packs of hounds, a pack of foxhounds in Maryland and a pack in Virginia, and spending an awful lot of time driving from place to place. In 1994, Loudon West was established, and Bay was asked to be huntsman and joint master along with Dr. Rogers and Dr. Gable. At this time, Bay resigned as huntsman for Goshen so he could devote all his time to the new pack. On top of that, he was training and riding races, winning 8 out of 31 starts in '91, and is credited with 13 wins, 15 seconds, and 9 thirds in his American career from '88 through '97. In '91, he was named Amateur Rider Club of America National Champion Race Rider. I remember the first time I met him. I can't remember the year, but Mrs. Haight introduced us at Virginia Hound Show. It didn't take long walking around the old kennels at Oaklands, looking at other people's hounds, to realize Bay knew hounds, and he knew what he liked. I was really taken by his knowledge and enthusiasm. I don't remember the first time I hunted with him, but I'm sure it was at Piedmont. Green Spring would bring hounds down every year in those days, and Bay was a regular. I would also try to get to Virginia when Bay and Randy Waterman would mix their hounds in the spring. Hunting with Bay was always entertaining, often nerve-wracking, and usually an adventure. Bay was a natural in the hunt field. He understood hounds and they understood him. After all, they hunted for the same reason, the pure enjoyment of it. Bay had a way with hounds, one that is as much a gift as anything that can be learned. I've seen him look a hound in the eye and growl and completely chastise that hound without ever raising a finger to him. He could read hounds almost instantly. He could tell who was a troublemaker or who had class. Bay would come up and hunt with me a couple of times a year, and one of the things that amazed me was his ability to read the country. He could be in country he'd never been in before and stay with hounds. Combine this with his ability and nerve to ride any horse over anything, and you've got the makings of a pretty darn good huntsman. His visits were always looked forward by all of us at Green Spring, but I especially enjoyed having him there. Bay was a great horseman. He could read, as well as he could read hounds, he was just as good, or if not better, at reading horses. He could ride as well and as hard as anybody I knew, and had no fear. Staying with Bay when hounds were running took some doing and tested one's nerve. Actually, the only thing scarier than keeping up with Bay on a horse when he was hunting was when he was hunting in the wheelchair and trying to stay. Once I'd had a particularly nasty fall and was in need of a couple of safe horses that I felt would take care of my banged up body and my shattered nerves. I called Bay. He showed up with the mare for me to try. She spent the whole meet essentially standing on her hind legs. When I commented to Bay that I really wasn't sure that she would help get my confidence back, he assured me she wouldn't go the whole way over. And her jump more than made up for this minor problem. He He was right. She was a great mare. He came back a couple weeks later with another one for me to try, and I commented that this horse seemed to jig a bit. I hadn't seen him take a walking step all day. He assured me that it was worth it, and the rest of the ride on this horse was special. Again, he was right. The horse suited me to a T, and both these horses were ones that a lesser horseman might have dismissed. But Bay saw the good in them and found a use for them. Bay wasn't above a little needling in the hunt field. One time we were having a joint meet with Piedmont, and hounds were running pretty well through Mr. Mellon's when they crossed Rokeby Road close to the airstrip. There weren't any panels right there, and some car followers were trying their best to open the gate, but not having much luck with it. I was riding one of the horses we'd gotten from Bay, and I hear him behind me. He can jump it. He can jump it. It was one of those stone walls with the post rail above it. Every time we'd make any move, all I'd hear from behind me was Bay. He can do it. He can do it. Over and over again, until I had to see if he was right. He was. However, I didn't know that the rails were the old chestnut rails and were impossible to replace if we'd broken any. The Piedmont masters were not amused. There are people that are fun to be around, and especially to hunt with, and Bay was one of them. When he had his accident in April of 1998, I knew that I'd lost a great hunting companion. I was very concerned as to how he would handle being confined to a wheelchair. He did manage. He was an inspiration. He learned patience. He grew as a person and a father. And he carried on better than any of us could have imagined. He continued to be active with Loudon West and hunting in general. He's been a mentor to young people wanting to get into the business. He would follow hounds in his chair and scare the people around him to death. He was a fixture at the Virginia Hound Show and can be seen at races most weekends. His zest for life was apparent and irrepressible. And as many times as he rolled that chair, it seems very ironic that it was melanoma that caused his demise. I think we all thought he'd break his neck. Bay, we'll miss you.
You know, I talked about Bay being the common denominator through which we met a lot of people, and that was my fortune when Bay invited me on one of those trips up there to hunt with you, Andrew, when he was bringing one of those horses with you. And then got to know Andrew quite well through the hound shows that we went to. So our next speaker, Will O'Keefe, really probably needs no introduction because we all know him as the voice of the Virginia point-to-point circuit and as the administrator of the Central Entry Office. What you probably don't know about Will is that his wife, Will and his wife Kathleen lived at Morgan Park and managed the property there during the time that Bay was the master huntsman of Loudon Hunt West. And Morgan Park was a very critical part of our hunting fixture. And David Moyes mentioned about Bay working hard to reopen old country and open new country. And one of the areas that they opened in and around Morgan Park was from Route 7, where Beacon Hill is now, which was the old Arthur Godfrey estate, all the way up towards Taylorstown, north of Raspberry Falls Golf Course. And they got this all incorporated into hunting territory for us. And I remember being out on that Raspberry Falls golf course sometimes leaving with people shooting off and foxes running across the fairway. And, you know, it was great territory, and it was kind of wild and woolly, and it was in the days before Loudon County became overdeveloped. So here to talk about Bay's racing and probably some of this hunting is Will O'Keefe.
Thank you, Barbara. Boy, this is a lot of tough acts to follow. Barbara asked me to speak and said, can you keep it to about 5 minutes? And I said, well, that's impossible talking about Bay Cockburn. I'd have to go through this speech like they went through light at full speed. I first met Bay, or first realized that Bay was in Virginia in 1988 through steeplechase racing. I had the pleasure of seeing most of Bay's 430-some races over fences in Virginia and Maryland. There was one thing that was clearly evident from the get-go. Bay Cockburn rode as if winning was the only alternative. He never gave up. Schooling might have been questionable at different times on some of his horses, but they never gave up on him and he never gave up on them. A big part of Bay's career riding steeplechase races was with the point-to-points. Andrew gave you some statistics. They were sanctioned races. In a combined career of point-to-point and sanctioned races, Bay rode 433 races, winning 85 times, running second 74 times, and third 54 times. That's a 20-some percentage, which is really, really good in steeplechase racing or any kind of racing. First win, 1988 at Piedmont point-to-point on a horse called Colonel Cafoot. His career unfortunately ended in 1998 riding over fences with the win at the Eustace Cup on drawing a blank. Iron Fist.
Iron Fist.
That's what I get for not listening to Kathleen and not bringing glasses. One of my favorite stories about announcing has to do with Bay Cockburn. Bay was riding the horse for the Rogers, Imperial Morn, in 1992 in the Deep Run Hunt Cup. I'm announcing the races. Bay comes around the last turn. It's obvious he's going to win. He goes on to win easily. He comes up to me after the race and he thrusts a bottle of wine into my hand. He said, man, you won this race for me. You take the wine. I said, how in the world did I win a race for Bay Cockburn? Bay confessed, riding around the final turn and entering the stretch, there were 2 fences in the stretch. One, obviously he had to jump. The second one, he wasn't so sure whether he had to jump it or not. And in Bay's descriptive language, he described to me what was going on in his mind. He could hear me announcing it, and he said, bloody Jesus, man! Tell me what to do! So, I say, not having any idea that I'm doing this, and he's only got 1 more fence to jump. So I got the wine and he got the win for the Rogers. Bay had a wonderful point-to-point career. He was the leading rider in 1990, 91, 93, and 94. He was the second leading rider 3 other years. He was the second leading Virginia Steeplechase Association rider in 91. Not only did he have his 85 wins over fences, he trained 68 winners over fences. One of the highlights of Bay's career was the fact that he won 4 straight Casanova Cups back in the days when winning owner-rider races was a real challenge. These are the years of Topiador and other really nice horses. One of the keys to Bay winning 4 straight Casanova Cups in the last weekend in February was that he was riding horses that he had hunted with Loudon West, and they were really so glad to get out of the hunt field and start racing. This was a piece of cake. 2.5 miles over timber fences with takeoffs and landings. And any of you who helped Bay handle the country, takeoffs and landings and fences was not a high priority. Lone Star Lester was one of the best horses that Bay rode. He rode and trained him. He was the Timber Horse of the Year in 1994, and he was second in the Seven Corners Series. He was the fourth of the four horses that, or the three horses that he won four straight Casanova Cups. Eternally Irish in 91 and 92, Thanks Henry in 93, and Lone Star Lester in 94. Eternally Irish in 1992. Coming around the first time around the Casanova course is a fence in the far left, it's a chicken coop. Bay and Eternally Irish separated company. Eternally Irish didn't have the good sense to run away. He stood very nearby. Bay did one of his mounts from the ground, chin up. He got on. He was probably a quarter of a mile behind at that stage, and he won by 10 lengths to win. He tried to pull that another time and almost took out the field. That's another story. 5 wins on Lone Star Lester and 5 wins on Word of Honor for the Rogers. 4 wins on Imperial Morns for the Rogers in his career. 3 wins on Roses and Drums. One of the nice horses that he rode and trained, Exploding Tune, had 6 wins with Bay training, 2 Bay riding and Jill Waterman riding, and winning 4 of those races. As I mentioned before, after I remembered, Iron Fist winning the 1998 Eustace Cup. He went on to win the 2001 Virginia Gold Cup. This was a very unique double that year as Bay started and did the early training with not only Iron Fist, who went on to win the Gold Cup, but also Michael Hoffman's solo Lord, who won the Maryland Hunt Cup. I mean, that's an incredible statement. This is never hardly equaled any time to win the Hunt Cup and win the Gold Cup with horses that you started along the way. I wasn't there because I was in Maryland announcing the races, but the week after Bay's accident, probably the most moving, sentimental, heart-wrenching, whatever you want to describe, Classy Ivor winning the Alfred Hunt race at the Middleburg races with Evan Sutton up. I don't think I heard there was not a dry eye in the crowd. That was one of the most moving moments in Virginia steeplechase history. Other horses that he trained, and as you've heard before, Bay didn't stop his career. When he had his accident, he continued to train horses and did extremely well with those horses. During his career, he trained Lowndes Lizard to win the Seven Corners Championship. One of his most winning horses training was a horse called I'm Telling. There's one race that I'm Telling ran, and one was the Rogers Memorial at the Morgan Park races. Jacob Roberts was riding him, and at the last fence and over the last fence, he looked like he was hopelessly beaten. He lost his momentum, had a bad fence. You know, we're all rooting for I'm Telling. It was as if Bay Cockburn jumped into Jacob Roberts' hide and rode the last 1/8 of a mile. he picked this, Jacob Roberts, Bay, picked this horse up in livery, carried him across the finish line, and won the race. Again, an incredible moment. 3 wins with Maximize. Golly won 3 races with Bay training him, and had his early training before he won the Field Hunter Championship. I think probably one of the proudest moments that I saw Bay have was in 2010 and 2011 when he was in attendance when Sammy was the leading novice rider over fences in Virginia. I mean, that was another one of those great moments. I had the pleasure of hunting behind Bay. Bay had a habit of selecting someone to ride with him and had the dubious pleasure of getting rails, closing gates, and such. And Bay would recruit me occasionally to be that person. Of course, 9 or 10 years older than Bay, but my adrenaline would get going. Following Bay Cockburn, I jumped fences, and my horse jumped fences that we would have never considered jumping in a sane venue. Again, Barbara said a lot about Bay and his paneling. No takeoffs, no landings. One day, we're clearing trails near the mountain in Morven Park, and I'm going along and I'm throwing rocks to the left and rocks to the right out of the trail, and Bay turned around and said to me, "Bloody Jesus, man, are you going to throw all the rocks off of the mountain in Morven Park?" I did not throw another rock after that. No one has mentioned it yet. When coving season started at Loudon West, the staff was very well turned out in dark green coats. Looked very nattily. And then appearing on the scene was our huntsman and master, Bay Cockburn, wearing, it had to have been from the thrift shop, a mustard-colored jacket that he took incredible pride in wearing throughout coving season, year after year after year. Hopefully somebody will tell us where it is, because it should go in the Hall of Fame. Not only mustard-colored, but wrinkled. Bay Cockburn. Barbara said it earlier. When God invented Bay Cockburn, he threw away the mold, and we will miss him immensely.
Next, Beth Newman DeStanley. She's actually one of the ones here who's known Bay the longest, and for about 25 years, I think, and she was a contemporary of his, also on the racing circuit. She's also an award-winning rider, having won the Lady Rider Timber Championship on 2 different horses. I hope I pronounced this correct. Duke Kahona Moku in 1994, and Bird on a Song in 2002. So over the years, she has become a very, very close friend with the Bay's family, and she is the godmother to Katie.
Fortunately, my first meeting with Bay was not in the hunt field. Actually, I met Bay before he ever hunted hounds in the U.S. I'm not sure Bay had been in the country more than maybe a few months working for Tom Pratt when I met him. I was training my very first timber horse that I ever trained for clients. Called my dear friend Woods Winans and said, "Woods, would you ride this timber horse for me?" And Woods was like, "I have too many of my own, Beth, but there's this English guy. I think he rode a lot in Ireland. He goes, bring the horse over, we'll let him school. I'm like, okay, Woods. So I arrive with the horse tack to school. Babe bustles out of the barn, and he looks at me and he goes, well, does he jump? I said, well, I didn't enter him in a flat race. So with that, Bay hops up. We have 2 barrels and a rail on top. Off Bay goes at his usual Mach 3 pace, flies over the rail, pulls up, goes, oh, bloody hell, he can jump, all right. We went to Old Dominion 2 days later. That year, I think we had a couple of thirds and maybe a second, I'm not real sure. But it was the start of a fabulous friendship. In raising, Bay was not shy about giving advice or criticism. When I decided to take up timber riding myself, I got a lot of criticism the first few races I ran from me. You're riding too long, you're doing this, you're doing that. So finally, the first year at Piedmont when I rode, I'm walking the course, Bay comes trotting up to me, he goes, all right, I'm gonna tell you how to win this, and you're gonna listen, right? I said, well, that depends on what you tell me. But he goes, now this is it. You break, you go out the first loop around the country. Just stay close. Don't worry about where they are. I'm like, okay. He goes, then you can come back through the stretch. He goes, when you jump that fence in the stretch and head down that hill, he goes, you give them a good old whop on the neck and ride them like you're sending them for the finish. He goes, then you get to the bottom, you settle a little bit, give them a breather, and then you just kick on for home. I won that year. I won 4 years after that. It was great advice. It worked for me. Apparently it worked for Bay at Piedmont as well. As far as hunting with Bay, I did hunt with Bay for a number of years. It was amazing. I don't think there are quite words to describe it. I think a lot of people have talked about it. It was worse than what they say. I think he went out there to deliberately torment us. But Bay did have a habit, when he got to a cover and his horse could negotiate it, of jumping off, letting go of his horse, and jumping into the cover himself. Occasionally his horse was there when he came out. Occasionally he came out the other side with no horse, or the horse just wasn't there. On one occasion, hounds are running. We're going down the side of 704. I'm galloping along, trying to catch up. All of a sudden, Bay pops out of the trees beside me and starts running down the road. I'm like, what are you doing? Where's your horse? Don't know. Lost him. He looks over, grabs the reins of my horse. Get off! I'm not getting off my horse. He goes, oh yeah, you are. And with that, he grabs my arm, snatches me off the horse, hops on my horse, and away he goes, leaving me standing in the road. Luckily, there were nice car followers who took video until we found Bay where he put the fox to ground, and I got my horse back. This is some choice words for him. He was an amazingly fun person to compete with, and to hunt with, and to have as my dear friend. I don't think there are any of us who will ever forget him or our memories of him. And in saying that, I just wanted to say to his students, Emmy and Amber, his kids, Katie and Sam, this last year of Bay's life, when we were able to get together with him, the thing he enjoyed most was talking about you guys. Was talking about how well you guys were doing in school, Emmy and Amber, how well you were doing with your racing and your riding. And all I can say, he was very proud of his students, and mostly, he was very, very proud of his children. He loved you too dearly. Thank you.
Now, many of us know Peter Walsh, our next speaker, as the manager of Milton Center's Cockburn, and often we see him as the field master and or whipper in for the Orange County and Piedmont hunts. But Peter actually first came to the United States from Ireland as a race rider. And he was a contemporary of Bay's on the race circuit. And in fact, he shared riding duties with Dr. Rogers, Word of Honor, who was a Timber Horse of the Year. And so here to talk about what it was like to race against Bay in the same race is Peter Walsh.
I am not a public speaker. I'll tell you right now. So we'll get this over with. I'll pay after this. Put an arm around me, give me a pat, and say, "Way to go, Pete, give me a beer." Let me see. I'm very lucky to have ridden in Ireland, some in England, over here against some of the best riders that a lot of people would see and hear about, and I was very, very lucky to do that. Bay was one of those riders who you could look at him and say, boy, I wish I was that good. Because he would just ride a horse the way a horse should be ridden. You know, whether it was a good horse, bad horse, didn't make any difference. The guy just sat up there, those long legs just, if he rode long, he never rode short, he got the best out of the horse that he could ever get. You know, everyone talked about, you know, hunting with Bay, and my second passion now in life is fox hunting. I love it. Milton Center and I, 6 days a week, 7, if it was 8 days a week, we'd be hunting 8 days a week, and we love it. When you want to race at Loudon Hunt, there was always they gave you a cap to come hunt with Bay at Loudon Hunt, and I was like, I don't know. I heard too many stories of Bay always say to me, Peter, come on, you got that free cap, why don't you come on over and come with me? I say, Bay, I get paid money to ride here, ride race against you, I'm not going to follow you to the hunt. There's no way. It's a little crazy. I don't know why he did it, but the jocks wouldn't want to be cold or raining or hot or anything. They'd walk in, usually he'd have his gear on already because he was late from hunting, or he'd just show up, so he'd show up with his mud britches on or whatever, his boots and his silks, and then he'd take his coat off and go ahead and weigh up and weigh in and everything. I'd be sitting there and I'd be like, oh my God. I'd take up the program and I'd be like, I hope he's not going to race. Because I always thought I had a chance, but then when Bay showed up, I was like, gosh, this is going to be a long day. But he'd come over, he'd sit down beside me, you know, there wasn't much room, he'd like shove us away, he'd sit down, he'd say, how you doing today, Peter? In his best English accent. And he said, Dad, you shot today, you know, how's your horses, what are you doing? You know, you going to the front, where are you going to be? And I turned to him and I said, does it make any difference where I'm going to be? No matter where I am, you're going to be there. Said, yeah, you know. Even going down to the start of the race, you know, I'd be on a horse that pulls a little bit, you know, and I hear this thundering thing come on. And before I forget it, I'm always trying to think about how I would describe it, you know, here today. And I like this movie, The Wizard of Oz. I always thought, you know, how to describe Bay? The Wicked Witch of the North. Bay would come along behind me and he's like, I got you now, my pretty. This was just going to the start. Not that I'm sitting up there just going on nice and easy. He'd bring his horse up beside me and just put his head right in my lap. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And he would just pull away. Get down to the start, you know, and I was always like, that's it, you know, you wondered where he is in the race. Because whether you're running down to the first fence, the last fence, didn't make any difference. Bay Cockburn was there, you were in trouble. Under his hooves and kicking heels, he was going to do it. There are a couple of incidents, you know, with Bay. I watched him, I think, ride a lot more than I rode against him. And like I said, it was a good thing. But there were a couple of times when we rode together
this one time at Montpelier, he never got a chance to actually ride enough races for money at the hunt meets. I think his weight and then just the horses he would get, just sometimes, you know, he actually knew the best thing to do. He would put the professionals on anyway. He would come in, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, one time we were racing and I had this great joke, I'm going to tell it because, well, let me go back one place. Bay and I rode a race at, I think it was Tanglewood years ago. And it was one of those times when he got to ride a sanction race. And I was on a front runner, a bit of a puller, and he was on a front runner, which was just a front runner. He didn't have to be there, really, but he was like, this is a front runner. So there's 3 fences on the back, 3 on the front, and 3 down the back, and 3 in the front. And it's not a big track, but hit 4 grand, 4 grand, 4 grand. I mean, it was so money. He's like, down to starting sadistic race, just like home. So I knew what was coming. So we jumped off and we're running along, and our horses are getting tired. And I said, hey, I'm not going to make it. So we jumped the last fence down the back. 50 yards from there is where the stables are. And then you turn around and you jump the last straight down to the finish. So we're standing there, our horses are breathing hard, and just 3 horses come by us. Okay? Now this race is like probably, the total purse is like $6,500 probably for maiden claimers. We're lucky if you want a piece of it. So we're standing there, we're watching them go by, 2 go down the inside, they pull up. 3 horses go down. We're standing there and we see this tail go zip. 1 horse is falling. So Bay looks at me and I look back and I'm like, oh no shit. So he said, Peter, 3rd place and 4th place, a little bit of money. I'm like, no. I said, we can't do this. The horses are down. He says, listen, we'll just canter down over the 2 jumps easy. I'm like, all right. Idiot. I mean, it's like outcoming, it's just a slow canter. And we get over it, and he's like, this is good, takes off. We're standing there, and I get down, we pull up, and I say, hey, Jesus Christ, what the hell is going on? And he said, we just schooled off the last 3. He's like, 3rd place and 4th place money, I told you. That was big. You know, he got every little piece he could, and when he had a chance to ride for money, he made the best of it. There's one story, we had a joke that I'd heard a long time ago. I told it today one day, which is the worst thing I ever did. This horse in Ireland, you know, the trainer is a farmer trainer, and he doesn't have many horses. He gets this horse, you know, he's going on, and the horse has got terrible form. It's wrong day, he's going to get him going and ride the hair off him. So, get up in the first jump, my horse jumps in the air and lands on the heap, and all of a sudden I hear, Peter, don't forget 1, 2, 3, up! Well, it didn't work. And all the way around, Bay comes up beside me, and he's having this conversation with me, telling me, come on, Peter, you know, do this, do that, do that. I'm like, Bay, Jesus, leave me alone. Move away, we move over after. I moved back, there he was. He just never stopped. That was the great thing about it. Bay was a fun guy. He was fun to ride with. And like I said, I wish I had ridden a lot more with him because, you know, riding against some of the best riders, it makes you, I believe it makes you a better rider. And they did that for a lot of people, whether it was hunting or racing. He was just one of those special guys, and it was good to know him. He was a truly good guy. Thanks.
Ron Blankenship and his family became neighbors of Bay's when they moved into the village of Unison in 2008. And over the last 5 years, Bay has become a close friend to Ron's family and has taken his daughters, Emmy and Amber, under his wing to teach them how to ride. In 2012 and 2013, Bay trained Emmy and her horses, Cowgirl and GR's Prize, to the Junior Field Master Championships in both of those years. Emmy now owns I'm Telling, the horse that you've been hearing about, and she plans to be racing him this spring, which he turns 16 next week, Emmy, is that right? So here to talk about what Bay meant to his family is Ron.
Thank you very much. I'm also not much of a public speaker, so I wrote down almost everything I want to say. But so please forgive me if I start to stumble over my words. My family and I did not know Bay Cockburn during the part of his life where he was this award-winning jockey and this revered huntsman. We only knew him as the person he came to be after the accident. We moved to Unison in August of 2008, which was well after his accident in 1998. At that point in our lives, we had very little experience with horses. My daughters had previously attended a very small horse summer camp, which coincidentally was at Beth Distami's farm. So kind of a full circle. But that was essentially the limit of our exposure to horses and horseback riding. Very soon after moving here, we met Bay. It was incredible how full of life he was, and he obviously lived for his horses. Lucky for us, he took an immediate liking to our girls, and I do mean that, lucky for us. At that time, Amber was still pretty young. I think she was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and Emmy was 11. But Bay and Emmy hit it off right at the start. He saw something in her and immediately took her under his wing. And I think over the past few years, what we've learned is they both share somewhat of a similar form of fearlessness, and hopefully Emmy is a little bit careful with her fearlessness. At the beginning, he had her working in his barn, learning the basics, because we didn't have any horses, we weren't horse people. Much to Sam's joy, Emmy and then sometimes Amber were tasked to muck all the stalls, feed and water all the horses, and groom the horses after Sam got to ride them. It was obviously pretty dirty work, but Emmy really loved it because she was near the horses and she was with Bay. She hung on every word he said, and she did absolutely everything he told her to do, for better or worse. And I'm sure he loved that. I can remember one time in that early autumn, remember we moved in August, he showed up at our place, and we lived literally right across the street from him. And street is an exaggeration of a word. It's really kind of a gravel dirt road. And there's a 90-degree turn, and Bay lives in the turn, we live on the outside of the turn, so we're right across from each other. And he very quickly learned how to open our gate and come in. And so quite often we would look out the door, and Bay was sitting out there yelling for us. And so I remember one day early on, probably in the fall of that first year, Bay's out there, and he said, "Hey, let's go take a look at your barn." And so we had a barn, we had property, we had lots of stuff, but nothing in the stuff. And so we go down, he inspects our barn, he's looking at it, and I'm looking at him thinking, what has he got going on in his head? And we went to tack room, but obviously there was a lawnmower there were brooms and things like that. And so I didn't think much more of it. But by December, not even 4 months after moving to Unison, Bay had us driving him in his van up to the Urbana Riding Club with a truck and trailer in tow behind us. And we were checking out a pony that his friend Grace was trying to sell. I should have wondered then, why was someone who had a summer camp or a horseback riding camp trying to get rid of a horse? And so we were doomed from the start because Emmy and Sparta, the pony, hit it off very well. Sure enough, we ended up trailering Sparta home that night, and by the time we returned to Unison, Bay had already decided that the pony needed a stallmate. And so he gave us, in addition to Sparta, us purchasing Sparta, he gave us his young mare, Minnie. I soon realized that Bay had sucked us into his world. What I didn't realize was how sheer lucky we were to be a part of that world. From that point on, Bay was literally a daily fixture in our lives. As soon as the girls would get home from school, he was either at our door or on the phone calling and wanting to know when they were going to go horseback riding. Homework really didn't matter these days. It was all about riding the horses. It was very common to see Bay, Emmy, Rufus and Tootsie, and if you know Bay well, you know who Rufus and Tootsie are, trotting down the road in unison, just the four of them. And sometimes, Sam usually worked his horses in the morning before school, but sometimes he would join in on the afternoons. And he spent a lot of his home time tutoring Emmy as well. They would go cross country, and he would show her where all the right trails were that she could go to, and he'd steer her away from where she shouldn't go. In our area, there aren't many places where you shouldn't go, so I think they went everywhere. Over the course of these first few months, I had heard some pretty wild stories about Bay before his accident. And because they were so wild, I just simply couldn't believe them. But as we began to spend more time with Bay, I started seeing some hints of truth in these stories. And I soon realized that not only was he a daredevil back in the days when he was riding, but now he was pretty fearless in his chair. And there was no field that he refused to go through. There was no hill that was too steep for him to climb. And there was no such thing as a day that was too wet or too cold. And I'm sure most of you who've hunted with him know that's true. It turns out that the only limit to his mobility was the battery in his chair. And even with that, Bay had a convenient tendency to forget to tell us that the battery was nearly dead as we started out across country. There were many occasions where Emmy would be out in the fields exercising either the horse or the pony, and myself and Melanie, my wife, would be with Bay, following behind, trying to figure out where she was and looking for her. And in many cases, we would get as far as we could possibly go and have to turn back, and Bay would look up and say, "My battery's dead." And so we would then have to take on the task of pushing that big, heavy chair all the way back to the van, or back to the road where he could actually get a little bit of life and juice out of the battery. As I said, he had no fear. He also didn't have a lot of patience or sympathy for anything that he perceived as a weakness in others. If one of the horses tossed Emmy, which I suspect, because we weren't always with Bay and Emmy, that it happened a lot more than we know, she very quickly learned from Bay that there really was only one option. He would immediately bell out, "Get back up on that damn horse." And she would do it. Bay used to drive my mother-in-law Mary crazy with this fearlessness. This place where we lived, it's really way out in the boonies, and there are no streetlights, there are not a lot of houses nearby, and if there is no moon, it is pitch black at night. But Bay was always coming to our house, and always going home, and always coming back, and many times we had him over for dinner and drinks, and he'd always be like, I'm fine, and he'd find his way back home. And so Mary was constantly trying to find these sneaky ways to hook a light on the back of his chair, or put a flashlight around his neck to shine forward, and even put a whistle on him, because we'd seen him tip over so many times. But every time he came over, conveniently, those safety items were gone. And I really do think that Bay, in his mind, felt that it somewhat limited the risk. And as we all know, Bay loves to be risky. He lived for it. He had a thirst for life. Bay and his chair, they were quite the pair. Many of us, and I'm sure, like Barbara said, at the bar after this, there will be lots of stories about his horse riding days, but there are lots of stories about his days afterwards. And he would take that chair cross country, no matter where it was, and there were often some pretty disastrous results. He had to be rescued many times after getting stuck in the mud, or even falling over. And I know that one time Sam and Amy were out riding, and his friend Matt was out on the back porch hanging out, and all of a sudden he heard this voice yelling for help. And sure enough, Bay was tipped over in his chair, and everybody swooped in and helped him. And that's not to say that there was anything wrong with that. It just shows how endearing that fearlessness was. He wasn't going to be held back. There was a time early on when we first got Sparta, actually. It was that first winter. It was after a recent snowfall. And where we live, there's this huge hill that goes up back behind the Burnham's house, Chris and Beth's. And Bay loved to use that hill to train the horses. And so on that day, Sam was on one of the big thoroughbreds. I think it was Harry, if I'm not mistaken. And Emmy was on Sparta. And if you're familiar at all with Emmy and Sparta, you know Sparta is not a very good pony. Dr. Casey, I don't know if anyone knows Dr. Casey. Dr. Casey actually came over one time to draw Coggins, and we weren't home, so he was in there by himself doing it. And he called us later and said, "You cannot let that horse or that pony eat your children." But anyway, so in those early days, and he's not much better now. In those early days, Sparta really certainly gave Emmy a hard time, and I think, between Bay and Sparta, that's really what got Emmy to where she is now. But Sparta was giving Emmy a very hard time, and Bay basically said, "Sam, teach that pony a lesson." And so they switched. And so Sam got on Sparta, and little Emmy, she was only 11, she climbed up on Harry. And Sam, after a couple of rearings, he took off up the hill. And then we decided we were just going to go slow up into the field and then maybe make our way that way. Now remember, there had been a snowfall recently, so there was snow everywhere. And of course, Bay, he's going to go no matter where he wants to go. And so he's making his way across the muck and the wet and the snow, and he ends up getting himself stuck in the snow trying to go up a hill. He can't go up any further, and he can't go back. He's just spinning and spinning and spinning. Well, suddenly Harry looks up and says, I think I want to be where Sparta is. So he takes off, and here's Emmy with very little experience, flying up this hill in this racing thoroughbred, and they decide, Harry just, he sees a ditch, he jumps the ditch, hits the other side, and Emmy goes flying. And I'm looking at Bay, I'm looking at Emmy, and I'm looking at Bay. And Bay's like, forget about me, just go get her. And so it's just one of those funny stories, and Bay was just, he was such a great person, and we had such a great time with him. We've come a long way since those early days with Bay. After years, he eventually got Emmy trained to a level where he believed, because it wasn't enough for you to think that you were ready, but he believed she was ready to ride competitively. And we'll be forever grateful for all the work that he and Sam helped us to get her to that point. In the junior races at Virginia Point to Points, as Will said, it became pretty common to see Bay and Emmy in the winner's circle. This past spring together on Bay's horse, Junior's Prize, they swept every race that season, and they finished with a thrilling win at the Gold Cup. In addition to Emmy, he also began working with Amber recently on Sparta, believe it or not. And, after quite a bit of schooling with Bay, she was able to participate in her first flat race at the Junior Hunt Cup up in Maryland this spring, this past spring. And she did quite well also. She went from almost last in the field to second place. So that was really great. We owe Bay a lot for that. We feel so blessed to have been a part of his life. We're also very lucky that he entrusted to us the ability to continue racing one of his last timber horses, I'm counting. We refer to him as Telly. But Bay and Emmy had this very interesting debate over the last few months over whether Emmy should race over timber or on the flat. And Emmy, of course, wants to go on the flat because she's seen Telly race. But Bay was very, very insistent, so it'll be interesting to see what happens this spring. With all that said, our relationship with Bay transcended all of our involvement with horses. We found ourselves spending a tremendous amount of time with him, and he truly became a part of our family. During the hunting and racing seasons, we spent nearly every weekend with him, either at a point-to-point, a hunter pace event, or at a fox hunt. We got to know so many kind people in the Piedmont and Snickersville hunts, all because of Bay. He took us everywhere with him, and we got the benefit of that, and we love him for it. We also spent many of the holidays together, and Bay was never once, obviously, to pass up an invitation to come over for dinner, or beers, or shots, or port. He loved port. I still have a brand new bottle of port that he gave me that Sammy and I had to crack open one night. Well, much of our time was spent oriented around these horse-related activities. We just really enjoy spending time with Bay. Hearing him recount his stories of growing up in England and then moving to Ireland and everything he did over there, as well as his stories from when he raced and hunted in Maryland and Virginia. It was amazing how he could hold all of these memories in his mind and just bring them forward at a moment's notice. His relationship with Emmy was very symbiotic. They depended on each other for so much. She looked up to him as a mentor and a friend, and I like to think that working with her gave him a purpose. Like I started out saying, we didn't really know him during those rip-roaring years when he was a jockey and a huntsman, but we loved him for who he was when we knew him. He was kind, but firm. He was dedicated to working hard, but he was always eager to put back a pint of Guinness. He would do anything to help a person out. And I think there are a lot of people that he has helped out. More than anything, he was an amazing man. He was strong, he was kind, he was loving, he was generous, and he had a thirst for life that I've never seen in anyone else in my entire life. We all love him deeply, more than any of us ever thought we could possibly do in such a short amount of time. Melanie, my wife, myself, my girls, my mother-in-law, father-in-law, Mary and Dale. We're deeply honored to have been his friends, and he just simply meant the world to us, and we'll miss him greatly.
You know, Ron mentioned about him going around in his wheelchair, and he was a common sight in Unison going up and down the roads. And if you remember, the predecessor to Tootsie was Piglet, Miss Piglet. And he was out in the fields. I don't know if it was Julie Dominguez or Bonnie Field, and he had one of his famous tip-overs, and people responded to help him. And Miss Piglet is there growling and snarling at everybody, wouldn't let anybody get near Bay because he was going to, you know, she didn't want anybody to touch him. Just for the last person to speak today will be Sam Butler. He's the former master of the Warwickshire Hunt in England and its current president. The Warwickshire Hunt is Bay's hometown hunt in England, where his brother Kim still serves, or is currently serving as one of the masters. Sam has known Bay, I think, since he was 5 years old. And he's had a lifelong friendship with him, and he's here to talk about the legacy that Bay leaves us all.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm completely and utterly overwhelmed by the tributes that you have paid our dear friend Bay. I have no idea what to expect. And I fear that my words would be very mediocre in trying to summarise some of the thoughts and some of the experiences that you've had with him. He was trouble to be with. You did fly with Bay. He was the wind under your wings. An amazing man. I've been lucky to know Bay since we were 7 years old. He's been part of my life for 50 years. And I think I can truly say that he has been my best friend. I have that same enduring picture of him and still do ever since we met. He was always the same, never compromising, always Bay. Strong-willed, genuine, brave, sensitive and loyal. Never complaining. He has touched everyone in this room and beyond, sometimes only through reputation, and leaves part of himself with each and every one of us. An extraordinary achievement. Kim, his brother, and I are here to pay our personal respects to him, and on behalf of his family in England, Anne, Georgie in Australia, Valerie, Tony, Alex, Jack and Fiona, and I wish they had been here to see this. And also to represent his very many friends in England and in Ireland. We are here to join in this celebration of this very special person. A life taken full on and at an extraordinary pace. He had a great way of connecting with people. He was attractive to us all, although perhaps more so to the opposite sex. He was adored and found irritatingly good-looking, almost fascinating. From his and my early days, he was always more successful and seemingly without trying. They would sit, often with a drink at the bar, waiting for the girls to come to him, which invariably they did, coaxed by that inner strength, confidence, that impish smile, and the irresistible cheeky twinkle. This personality came out to the fore in his relationship with horses. There was not a pony nor a horse that he could not ride. They all went for him, and many of us followed him over places we would never have gone, nor jumped, as you all attested to. The more difficult the going out hunting, the more difficult the race riding, the more he loved it. The more difficulty we all got into behind him, the more he loved it. Often mocking us for being half-hearted or chicken. His laughter in those circumstances was infectious. Bay was at one in Ireland and made many long-standing and wonderful friends there. They were extremely fond of him. They admired his fearless determination as a jockey and trainer and took him to their hearts as a person. Coming to America 25 years ago was another chapter where he was met with the same affection. He threw himself into your way of life, and I think he might have taught you a thing or two as well. He frightened you with his bravery and inspired you with his determination. But a bravery and a single-minded focus which he had to take to a new level after his accident in 1998. How did he not only cope, but still continue to be so positive when so suddenly confined to a wheelchair and paralysed from the neck down? Partly this was due to the character of this remarkable human being, and partly, of course, because of the respect his friends had for him and the enormous care provided by his family and those around him. Chrissy promised to me that she would stand by him until he was capable enough, and she did. Katie and Sam had been so important to him and had given him purpose. Gordie with Robin have been wonderfully supportive, and as have all his friends, calling in, telephoning, and not because they felt they should, because they wanted to. And that makes a huge amount to me. However, Amy, you and Iona, supported by Mark and Ben, have been unbelievably caring of Bay, way beyond what could have been expected. It has been humbling to see the care and love you have shown this friend. You have been selfless, and your attention has had no limits. Thank you unreservedly for giving him a quality and length of life that there is no chance that he would have had. As for the future, we will never forget this man, Bay Cockburn, or Cockburn as you'd like to call him. Kim and I give up whenever it's called. We never like to correct you, it's wonderful to hear. A proper person, the like of which, if we are lucky, we come across only once, perhaps twice in one's life. We have all been lucky. He had that ability to be strong and brave, stubborn, very stubborn and difficult, while showing immense sensitivity and genuine kindness to others. We all mattered to him, and although sometimes this may have not been obvious on the surface, he loved seeing people succeed, especially if they were prepared to learn from him. He had a connection with the young and those he considered not to be as lucky as him, an extraordinary characteristic after all he'd been through. So many people benefited from what he taught them about riding, as we have heard, and he was always hugely upset when things went really wrong for people. He was determined to say goodbye to his friends and family in England before making that very difficult trip last autumn. But oh, how so much it meant to him and the inspiration that he got for it. Where did he find this strength? I think the answer lies in the raw affection that he had for all of us and the love we returned. It was a mutual feeling. It created an energy, a real meaning and purpose for him, something that he could fire off. He really understood about relationships. I loved this man. He taught me a lot. It was a privilege and humbling experience knowing him. We will always miss him, but we must thrive and go forward with the example that he set. His legacy will live long through the experiences we've had with him and the relationships we've had with him, through memorable stories with his friends, and most especially through Katie and Sam. When I talked to him in July after his illness was diagnosed, he accepted he had one final demand on him, and that was to come to terms with the fact that he was dying and to see the two of you right for the rest of your lives. You meant a huge amount to him.
Being in Lincoln with him on the way to the races, he had 10 minutes to get to Middleburg. We were scared to death in the car.
Greg Schwartz, the huntsman from Bull Run. Dennis Foster, did you want to say something? Or is
I think Bay would really be proud of what you've all done, and I think he'd say it's time to quit.
One last thing before we watch Bernie McMahon, who, when Bay retired as master of the Loudon Hunt West in 2007, Bernie wrote a poem on Bay's, for Bay, okay, and his retirement, on the occasion of his retirement.
Thank you, Barbara. Mr. Bay Cockburn, master of foxhounds, a man for all seasons. A season of challenge, a boyhood behind, a new country found, a skilled then mastered to follow the hound. A season of triumph, many hard-ridden races, but winnings abound. The pack he bred true to follow, their speed still renowned. A season of joy, the cool morning mists, the horns hunting sound, those famous hard runs, those foxes to ground. A season of pain, a loss so great that one can't explain how never again to feel bit upon rein. A season of courage, still the heart of a hunter, still a duty to lead, always our friend and our master in spirit and deed. And now a season of remembrance. Far away in a special land, there still rides a hunting band. All the friends that once we knew, remembered hounds still speaking true. And when gone away, sounds in ever autumn air, kick on, Bay, we know you're there.
After the program, which is going to end with the movie and then Spence blowing the horn, Bay's family would like to invite you to a reception here at Buchanan Hall, where we can continue to share the memories of the host, this very special friend of ours. I think you will all agree that all of our lives have been enriched by knowing Bay, and he's probably looking down on us right now and saying, what is all the fuss about? Let's kick on, and let's get to the bar. Okay? So, we're going to play a movie, and then if Spence, you come up right after that, and then we will reconvene to the bar and continue our reminiscing. Let's go.